With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to the Minefield podcast from Anfield Index Pro. I'm your host, Alan O'Donoghue, and as always, I'm joined by the Robin to my Batman, Dr. Andrew Vincent. We literally have just come on air talking about how Andrew is the talent in this podcast, and now you've been reduced to Robin. How are you doing, Andrew?
Well, considering my claim to being the talent was just that I am not involved in any of the recording, editing, scheduling, that was really my claim to being the talent, was just not being involved in any of the hard work. And so I think if you're doing the hard work, then you also get to be Batman. And I am happy to be Robin today.
Maybe I'm Alfred and you're Batman. Oh, shit, I don't like that. Because I'm old too. So, and you're the young buck, so.
I think you're just trying to get out of being Batman now.
I always want to be Batman.
You're Batman.
Thanks
you're
very much.
Batman. Enjoy it.
I will.
But I do expect the Batman voice for the next hour of the pod.
I can do that. I think we need to start this one again, don't we, Andrew? Anyway, folks, I apologize for my really, really poor version of Batman. Anyway, thanks. So, Andrew, following on from Klopp's press conference about the run-in and how important everything and everyone is to the run-in, I thought we'd talk today about the run-in. So
I think it's a great idea.
Thanks very much. So I suppose we've got, as of our recording today, so we are recording ahead of the Sheffield United match. So you guys will be hearing this probably after that. So hopefully you're hearing it on the back of another win. But I suppose 9 games left, Andrew, and we know that if we win all 9 games, we win the league. There's nothing can be done about it. In your belief, based on how Klopp has been as a front runner with Liverpool or a underdog with Liverpool, are you happy to be in this position? And do you think Klopp would be happy to be in this position? Or do you think he'd prefer to be part of the chasing pack?
I guess we'll start with me, because that doesn't matter as much.
Because you're the talent.
I'm the talent. Klopp. All right. So I would say just prefer to be in this position because it means we have more points than everyone else, and that's a better spot to be, just statistically. I think mentally it's certainly challenging in its own ways, but you get to a point in the season where you take the points and figure the mental challenge out. I think my two initial thoughts when you asked, like, where do I imagine Klopp would prefer to be? And this is just wildly speculative, but I think like the first thing is that I think he's just going to see himself as an underdog no matter what. Like that's where he will sort of paint himself and see himself. So even if we're a point ahead of City and Arsenal, he's going to look at those two teams in certain ways and just sort of feel like, see us in some sort of underdog role. Like, yeah, we're ahead right now, but like staying there and like winning this title, and like for sure winning this title this year would be an underdog kind of feat, like in the middle of a rebuild kind of like scrappy thing to do. So it fits right in with Klopp. I think the second piece that he would say there is just like, he doesn't really have any time at all to think about it and isn't going to spend any time at all thinking about it, whether or not that's true. But that certainly came across loud and clear in the press conference as he got a bunch of questions about, Arsenal's games and City's games. And he basically just said, I don't care. I'm not going to watch. I'm assuming they're going to win all of them. The last time I watched a game hoping City would lose was the Leicester game. I'm assuming the Leicester game where Kompany had the ridiculous strike. I think that was Leicester. I don't really know, but I'm assuming that was the last one. He was like, so I learned my lesson from that. I'm never doing it again. And so I think he would basically just say, like, we have to take every game absolutely 1 week at a time and ignore the rest. And actually, he said that in the press conference too, which is like the most important thing you can do kind of in the run-in here, since that's the name of the game, is ignore the noise from the outside. So I think that's what he would be trying to do, and basically just saying, like, probably better to have the lead, but also in some ways it doesn't matter because the task is the same, win every game.
And I like that. And I think I would agree with you because, he can't paint a picture with the squad saying, okay, guys, we got to catch up because they're not stupid. And the table doesn't lie. But I do think there are probably elements that he could possibly pick out. Look, lads, Arsenal have a much stronger goal difference. We got to go out and make sure we're converting our chances. How are we going to do that? And look at the process. Now, he probably wouldn't do that. I reckon he probably just goes game to game, lads, let's win this game. And that's just the way it is. But I think I'm wondering, like, people will often talk about how, like, Arsenal are in the lesser position because their players and their manager aren't used to winning a league. And they'll say that City are in the best position because they're consistently winning the league. And then we're probably somewhere in the middle because most of our players have won a league title. Is there much actually in that, Andrew, in your experience, or is that just a soundbite that's used by pundits and media and newspapers and outlets?
In a weird way, I think the answer here is probably both. And it's what we often talk about with narrative. And it's hard to totally avoid any sort of narrative at all. And, like, just when you're thinking about, like, I'm sure a lot of us who like participated in sports growing up, or maybe even like if you have a kid who participates in sports and you've been in a tournament and you're playing against teams you've never played before, there's that thing of like, okay, well, this team we have played this team we haven't played. This team beat that team and we beat this team. So by the transitive property of youth sport tournament participation, we should be better than this team, right? And it's like, you're figuring all these things out in your head. And it's really, that's something we do as humans, right? It's like, we're trying to, the title is important to us. There's a blank space of like, we can't know. We don't really like that. And especially as fans, like there's nothing for us to do from there. Why would we accept that as an answer? We're just looking for a conversation to enjoy ourselves a little bit. So being able to speculate and be like, well, who has the best chance? That's worth our time. I think once you get to the players level and the coaches level, where it's like there's something that they need to be doing, right? They need to be focusing on the next game. It's probably not a great use of their time to be thinking, well, who has the best chance? That being said, it's still important to them. So I think that it would be hard for them to totally keep it out of their heads of like, okay, well, Arsenal messed things up last year and have this, recent history of crumbling. So maybe they'll do that. And City, God, they're just so good. Like they'll win every game. And, what about us? Like I think those questions will certainly be there. And as long as you have those questions, typically you're going to fill them in with some sort of answers. There might be some of our more experienced players who are better about just not thinking about those kinds of things at all and keeping their heads down and playing the next game. My experience working with athletes is that they're sort of doing both. But it's like they know that the noise is noise. It's like they do it in kind of a way where it's like it's there, and then they'll kind of but like they know that like it's not really worth their time to think about, but still they kind of think about it. But then there's just also the moment of the actual game where they're not going to think about it anymore, because like when you're playing Sheffield United and you're in the run up to Sheffield United and there's a whole routine and you have a game in front of you and you have something to do, there's just too much going on for you to be doing the kind of speculating that we do as fans. And so that's what I would say is like probably it all creeps in and floats around, but they have a much better distraction from that noise, which actually isn't a distraction. The noise is the distraction from the performance.
And if you were working with a player or players in a situation like this, and someone comes in and they're sitting down opposite you and they're saying, like we've got these games and there's some tough games coming up, what kind of techniques would you be advising them to utilize in order to get them more present and focused on what's just right in front of you or what's happening right now?
There's two things when there's this kind of noise in the background. The first thing I'm always going to do is just try to check in to see how loud is this noise and how much is it affecting you. And so sometimes what happens is, so like basically what we just have talked about is everywhere. So like the athletes sort of know, like, I need to be focused one game at a time. And so then let's say they have this noise creeping in. I'm just going to use like a 1 through 10 volume knob. Let's say this noise creeps in every once in a while at like a 2. And maybe it's happening, in the space between games, or just like when they see something on the news, but by the time they get to practice or by the time they get to a game, they're not really thinking about it. If that's their experience of this, sometimes players will be like, oh, this isn't good. How do I get rid of it? And in that case, I'm going to say, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Like if it's creeping in at those random times, it's just, this is important to you. This matters to you. That's something your brain's going to do. You're a human. Like, let it ride and just pay attention to make sure it doesn't become louder or pop into spaces where it matters more. So that's the first thing, because sometimes my experience of athletes is that they are very worried about stuff going on in their brain, and like if they don't feel like they have control over it. And so if there's worries in there, if there's doubts in there, if there's just really human experiences in there, they're like, oh God, I got to get rid of these. And that's not always the case. And actually working too hard to totally clear your brain of all of those things is counterproductive, because it takes a lot of mental effort. So the first thing is maybe nothing, maybe just be reassuring that this is not a big deal. The second thing, so let's say the athlete, like I'm kind of asking about that, and the athlete's like, well, right before the game starts, and I'm like, we're playing Sheffield United, I'm feeling, oh my God, we have to win. And then I'm thinking, well, what if we lose? And then I all of a sudden feel like, well, I really can't make any mistakes. And I've got to go out there and I've got to really make sure not to give anything away that's stupid, because any mistake I make could cost us the title. Okay, now we're in problem territory, right? Because not only are these doubts happening at a time that they're affecting this person going into the game, but they're also affecting this person's process. And so that's what I'm paying a lot of attention to, is what's the goal that this individual is setting for themselves when they go out on the pitch. Anytime someone's goal is to make no mistakes, they're doing it wrong. Like that's an immediate red flag for me of like, you're setting yourself up to fail, because you're going to make a mistake at some point, and then you're going to get into this kind of dog chasing its tail situation of like, oh God, I got to make up for that, or I got to quiet down my game. And you're just adjusting a lot. So what I'm doing with that person is a little bit of what I'm doing with person one, which is helping them be comfortable with the idea that those doubts are present. And just recognize that that's part of the human experience, is to sometimes have these doubts or feel these pressures. Usually my favorite go-to kind of metaphor analogy for this is to react to those doubts the way you would react to a 4-year-old. And so like often with the athletes I'm working with, it's like they've got some sort of younger niece or nephew or family friend, or maybe a kid of their own, although that hasn't really been my experience as much. But like in that case, I can say, like, think about a holiday where your 4-year-old nephew is coming up to you and saying, like, Aunt so-and-so, like, I got something to tell you, right? What happens if you try to ignore that kid? 4-year-olds are relentless. If that 4-year-old thinks you just haven't heard them yet, like, that kid is going to yell and scream and tug and pull until it understands that it has gotten your attention. They have gotten your attention, right? And so like that kind of is what happens with doubts too. The more you try to push them out of your mind, at some level, like you might be able to distract for a little bit, but they just think you haven't heard them yet. So they're going to increase their volume and be really present. And now there's this kind of battle of it's taking all of your attention just to ignore this force of nature that is this doubt, or this 4-year-old in this case. So then the next thing I would say is, so let's say you pay attention to the 4-year-old, right? And in this case, the 4-year-old says, I don't know, something crazy. Like, when we go to sleep tonight, monsters are going to eat all of us, right? My guess is in this particular circumstance, you're not going to like lock your door at night and not go to bed because the 4-year-old says a monster is going to eat you. But probably you're going to sleep just fine. And the reason is just it's a 4-year-old thought. It's a 4-year-old idea. And so I encourage people to kind of treat some of these doubts or treat some of these concerns like a 4-year-old idea. This idea like, hey, if you make a mistake, you're going to lose the whole title. It's like, yeah, that would be upsetting. Getting eaten by monsters when we all fall asleep is upsetting. Obviously, one of those is more realistic than the other, and like that's fine. But in the same way, like your brain is not there to accurately reflect the world at all times and keep you posted on what's going to happen. Your brain is often just sort of there to populate thoughts and just possibilities and things. Then certain possibilities float through your head, and your brain's going to pick the ones that have some sort of emotion tied to them. And the bigger the emotion, the more likely your brain is going to be like, oh, hold it. What's that one? And so, you know, this thought about, hey, if you make a mistake, you might lose the whole title comes through your head and it stays there. And you're like, your brain's like, oh God, what's this one? This is important. Like, let's escalate this. Let's bring this up to the people at the top and see what they think. And then, you know, if you're tricking yourself into thinking, oh God, I'm going to make this mistake down, or just focus on how terrible it is, that becomes problematic. And so treating that thought the way you would treat that 4-year-old niece or nephew, of just being like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Like, thank you for bringing that to my attention, but also I don't need to pay attention to that right now. Also means you need something to bring your focus back to. That's where some sort of focal point, you know, probably a tactical or technical thing that you can bring your attention back to. Like often, I mean, it's 100 times I've said, like, have a one thing focus and have your strength that you can bring your attention back to. And that's what we'd work on from there. And normally, you know, just kind of putting that into the category of 4-year-old thoughts, like, brings a lot of relief for people. And it's a little, you know, there's enough humor in that analogy too, that they can kind of like laugh about it. And also it just helps them be comfortable with their brain in a way where, like, yeah, these doubts are going to pop up. You don't have to be alarmed about them. And ultimately what you need to focus on is the same.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit libertyshield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Listeners, that is absolute gold of an insight. It is genuinely that, because I use analogies like that all the time with the people that I work with, whether they're involved in sport or not. And one of the simple ways, as an expansion of that, I will always say to people is, have you got a picture of yourself as a little 4 or 5 year old kid? And even just an image of yourself as a 4 or 5 year old kid. And they're like, yeah, okay. Right, picture that little kid beside you. And would you turn around and criticize that little kid for making a mistake? Would you criticize that little child for thinking that there are monsters under the bed that are going to eat it? Would you criticize that little child for making a mistake that might cost his team or her team the league title? And I have yet to have any client turn around and go, yeah, of course I would. They all say, well, no, of course I wouldn't. And then we go into, well, essentially, this is what happens when we are under stress. We revert to sometimes a child response to so the child that took on the initial belief that is causing us that stress. Because for some players, they may not care one jot that if they make a mistake. Like, I would suspect Darwin Núñez is not sitting at home after making a mistake in a match, beating himself up. I'd say he's going, I can't wait for the next game. I'm just using him as an example. But I do think it's important that we all, on a personal level, can start to look at that little child that we were, who took on the beliefs, who didn't have a clear picture of what the world was like, and go, it's okay to have those thoughts. It's okay to have those beliefs. Let's just put our arm around that little kid and go, we're okay. We're actually okay. And I love your piece about picking up on that one thing that you know you're good at, that one solid anchor that you can go to, because that then brings us into the present moment. That gets our brain thinking about, it gets our brain thinking as opposed to reacting, which is the most important piece. So I love that explanation, Andrew. Thank you so much for that. Just before we carry on, Andrew, I do need to jump in and let the listeners know that this podcast is probably going to go on for about 50 odd minutes. So therefore, those of you listening on the free side, after 30 minutes, we will be cut off. To keep the lights running at AI Towers, we need subscribers, and you are getting well over 70 to 80 podcasts per month. So please do go and subscribe, and you will get the rest of this full episode. And with insights just like the one Andrew has given us, this could absolutely change your life. So actually subscribing to Anfield Index Pro right now could absolutely change your life. There you go, folks. On that note, Andrew, like this run-in to me feels like it will have such an interesting knock-on effect to where this club moves going forward. And I don't mean that if we win, it will be better. I just mean it's going to be bloody interesting to see what happens and how a new manager reacts to having to take over a championship winning team or a championship, what the tabloid media would call bottlers, and how they can come in and instigate their own culture or iron out some of the creases that need to be ironed out. Like, if you were working with a manager coming into this situation, what would you do? Would you do things differently about either of those? Like, would that influence how you would work? Or do you continue to return back to the person-centered and go, well, what are the goals you have, irrespective of what has happened last season?
Yeah, I think it's got to go back to the person-centered, because you have no idea how different groups are reacting and how different stakeholder groups are reacting. And so Like I think you have to understand the manager coming in there is new. And so, and new with a very complicated balance of power. So normally when a manager is replaced, it's because things haven't been going well. Mm-hmm. And so when you see something like a new manager bump, there's probably, and I don't know this for any sort of fact, but part of what I think is like a new manager bump probably partly just comes from a little bit of a new way of looking at the game, a little bit of relief, a little bit of a change, wanting to impress the new person. But part of it probably also comes from there's hope that wasn't present before. And so the idea normally is that this person coming in is going to help us do better than the person who just left. And so the hope that comes with that creates a little bit of positive energy and just perspective in the right direction. That won't be the case with this new person coming in, not in the same way. So even if people are happy with the appointment or feeling like, oh, this is a good person who we got in, no one right away is going to be like, thank God Klopp is gone. We really needed this fresh start. Pumped to have this new person here just to give us something new. And so more than managers in 90% of new appointment situations, this person's going to have to prove something, and they're just the power they have within the overall context of the squad is going to be low, especially when you consider some of the standing figures in the squad. So like Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and any of those longstanding leadership players, or even some of the new players who are very good. Like, if those players were to reject the idea of the next manager, they could tank the next manager, right? Like, if one of those players suddenly decided to reject the idea of Klopp right now, like, and let's say Klopp was going to stay for a few years, that person would be out the door, Klopp would stay, and like you'd get new people in. Like, it's just because of the dynamic that exists right now. Like, Klopp's not. He doesn't have to impress any of those players. He already has. That work is done. He has the buy-in. This manager has to get that. And so I think like your question is like, how do you work with that manager to help them react to that situation? I mean, the first thing is just like, you got to figure out how the players are reacting to the situation. The job of the manager probably is mostly focused on creating relationships with those players and getting buy-in for the system and structure, rather than being anything about what does the big picture look like. I think there's just going to be so many question marks about what the big picture looks like anyways, that even if we win the title, we don't start next year as favorites. So, yeah, I don't really know if I've fully answered your question here, but those are some of the things that would go through my head is, really, like I've never worked specifically with a manager or coach, although I think that would be really cool. Like the conversations I mostly have in the team settings where I work with anyone on the coaching side of things is, I'll comment on some team processes or things that I'm noticing, ask them some questions about what they're seeing on that front. And then, I'm asking them if there's any players they want to put on my radar. But otherwise, like I don't give a lot of direct feedback or direction, partly because my role is to work with the team, and the more direct advising I'm doing with anyone on the coaching staff side of things, like the more it compromises my trust from the players, because all of a sudden it starts to look like so it's kind of important for me not to be in that role at the same time. But yeah, like let's say I just like a manager was like, hey, how can you help me sort of with my managerial performance or, just the mental side of managing? And that was my role. I think really probably the focus is on the buy-in, which is where most managers would be anyways, is understanding like I'm not walking into this room as the biggest personality in here. I need to earn the respect of this group. And like you need to walk a really fine line of one, not walking in as the smallest person in the room. But also, I think if you walk in and start barking orders at people, you're going to look a little foolish.
Yeah, it's such a delicate balance, really, isn't it? In how to manage it. And I suppose that's what makes the the best managers, the best. Consistent managers are the best, where they can actually do that. And I think where the big challenge will be for anybody coming in, we're not getting a manager in who is going to have been as successful as Jurgen Klopp. It's just not going to happen because there's so few managers out there who are as successful as Jurgen Klopp. Mm-hmm. Unless we go for Mourinho, or like Ancelotti's not leaving Real Madrid, and Pep isn't coming. So essentially we're just not getting anyone who's anywhere near as successful as Klopp. So I think it's going to be a fascinating transition. I think you're right. We're definitely not going to start next season as favourites, no matter what the result is this season. Like, even if we go and win the league and the Europa League, we're still not going to be favourites. City are going to be favourites as long as Pep is still there. Or, yeah, they're just going to be favourites. That's just the way it is. But that then, I think there's a potential benefit in that as well for this squad. So a new manager coming in is not coming in with the expectation of, well, we're favourites, so we got to win. And they're coming into a bunch of players who are used to having a manager who maybe plays down the expectations and does buy into that underdog type of mentality. And I would certainly be walking in if I was the coach and going, guess what? No, look at who the betting's on. Nobody thinks we're going to win it this year. Some of us might not think we're going to win it this year, but do you know what? We're going to give it a bloody good go. And all of a sudden, I would think you're starting to show, okay, I'm aware of the things. I'm aware of how good you are, and let's just roll in together against the world.
You're hired.
Thanks very much.
You're hired. You're in.
But it's so simple. Well, we're making it sound simple. I could imagine if I walked into Virgil and said, okay, nobody expects us to win. And he goes, I fucking expect us to win. That might not be a good start. But I do think that the players are going to be used to that style of management, that style of thought, which is important.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's going to be, and we will definitely be having summer pods talking, and we'll get some guests on talking about who the new manager is and what we expect and hope for them. And we'll delve into this a little bit more. But do you think that an important element is going to be that personable, not trying to be Klopp 2.0, but spending time with each individual player, talking through, asking about them,
I guess, it depends a lot, because it's all about being genuine to who you are, and to be genuine. You can smell when someone's pretending. You can tell when someone's pretending. And so, if someone came in who was sort of a serious person, not very relationally oriented, more about, the tasks, the outcomes, a little bit more of a hard charging nose to the grindstone kind of person, if that person is trying to have the arm around everyone and give hugs, let's just take that, for example, right? Klopp hugs are Klopp hugs because Klopp is a hugger. So you don't know this about me, Al. I'm not a hugger. If I was out there after games throwing my arms around people, the cameras would be on me because they'd be like, everyone's uncomfortable. That's just not, it's not who I am. It's not what I do. It's not and so if I showed up in that role and that was how I walked into the room, then, it just wouldn't last long. It wouldn't take. There's a way for whoever is showing up next to connect with the players on a really genuine level without having to pretend and without pretense. That's what's really important. That's what gets respect, is to be able to show up as you are and have sort of an authentic relationship of here's what we're doing and here's what I can do, and finding that balance of seeing the people in front of you, recognizing the talents and strengths that they have. But also, you have authority in that role, and finding that balance of, how do I use that authority and hold that authority, like wield that authority really, given I'm not the most powerful person in this room, but I kind of also need to be. Like, I am the decision maker in this room, although I'm not the most socially powerful person in this room. That's a hard dynamic to have.
Hey guys, it's Eddie Gibbs from Anfield Index here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and I'm sorry to call time on the show before it ends. In the current climate, it's tougher than ever before to offer podcasts for free. At Anfield Index, we produce over 75 free shows every month, which I'm confident is unparalleled in the LFC sphere. Whilst we'd love to offer everything for free, the production costs now make this impossible. That said, we don't want to follow the model of other channels and lock all of our content behind a paywall. So what we've decided to do is to continue offering every show for free, but cut that offering to 30 minutes on our longer shows. So to get all of our shows in full and enjoy the best of everything we have to offer, we really hope you'll consider supporting the channel and signing up at AnfieldIndexPro.com. For about the price of 1 cup of coffee, you'll get every podcast in full with 0 ads. You'll also get access to our LFC VIP community, where you can enjoy live podcasts, engage with our podcasters, and chat with other Reds in real time. So that website again, AnfieldIndexPro.com. Join today.
Sports Social Podcast Network.